Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. My name is Nathan Carter, and while most fathers spend their lives protecting their children, I buried mine at just 5 years old. That alone should have broken me, but what came next? That shattered everything. 10 minutes before the funeral, I got a message that changed everything I thought I knew about my wife. While I stood over our son's casket, she was in Hawaii, wrapped in another man's arms. If you think that's where the betrayal ends, you're wrong. Because what I uncovered next wasn't just infidelity. It was something far darker. Let me tell you what really happened. I never imagined standing over a casket that small. 5 feet long, white, polished, almost too pristine, too delicate, like it was made for a doll, not a child. But inside that box was my son, Liam. My 5-year-old boy with the endless questions and the unstoppable laughter. The boy who once told me that his blue blanket made him feel safe because it scared the bad dreams away. That blanket was folded next to him now, tucked in by trembling hands, mine. I tried to hold myself together. God knows I did. But grief is a monster that doesn't knock. It crashes in, uninvited and unforgiving, tearing through your soul with claws made of memories. And as I stood there, my hands clenched, my jaw locked, I could feel it rising inside me. Hot, relentless, crushing. I could also feel the stares. From behind me in the pews, eyes burned holes into the back of my head. Whispered words slithered through the church like smoke. I didn't need to hear them to know what they were saying. Where's Isabel? Why isn't she here? I had asked myself the same damn thing 1,000 times. But unlike them, I had an answer, and it was one that still made my blood run cold. Just 10 minutes before I walked into that church, before I stood beside my son's coffin, I got a message on my phone. I hadn't expected it. I thought it was another condolence, or maybe something from the funeral director. My hand moved on instinct, swiping the screen. What I saw made me stumble. A photo. Isabel, my wife of nearly 10 years, lounging by a crystal-clear pool, sunglasses on, her golden skin glowing under the Hawaiian sun. A younger man, maybe late 20s, smug and shirtless, had his arm wrapped around her waist. In her hand, a cocktail with a tiny umbrella and a slice of lime. Below the photo was a message. Thought you should see what your wife is really doing today. A concerned friend. At first, my brain refused to understand what I was looking at. It couldn't be real. Isabel had told me she was flying to a conference, an urgent business trip she couldn't miss, even for the funeral. I had tried to be understanding, telling myself grief makes people act in strange ways. Maybe this was her way of coping. Maybe she was just breaking. But there she was, smiling, relaxed, entangled with some tan stranger while our son lay cold and lifeless in a box. My hands trembled as I stared at the image. Rage clawed up my throat like bile, thick and acidic. My knees buckled. I might have dropped the phone if not for my mother's hand gripping my arm. "Nathan," she whispered, voice sharp with concern. "You're shaking." I shoved the phone into my pocket like it was cursed, hoping somehow that would make it disappear. It didn't. That image was seared into my mind now, haunting me with every blink. But I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. Not in front of the town. Not in front of Liam. So I stood tall. The funeral director gave me a gentle nod, signaling that it was time to begin. I nodded back, barely aware that my legs were moving, carrying me to the front row, the place Isabel should have been. The space next to me was empty, and the silence there was louder than the organ music echoing through the church. I sat down, shoulders squared, face like stone. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Not the neighbors who gossiped. Not the friends who pitted. And certainly not Isabel. She thought she could disappear and leave me to carry this weight alone. She was wrong. But inside, I was unraveling. My thoughts raced back through the past few months, searching for signs I had missed. The late-night calls she'd take in the kitchen. The business trips that seemed to multiply overnight. The way she started pulling away from me, and worse, from Liam, as his condition got worse. She'd told me she needed space, that she was processing things differently. And I believed her. I chalked it up to grief, to stress, to a mother who couldn't cope with watching her child waste away. I had no idea she was already gone. The pastor began to speak, his words a blur in my ears. He talked about Liam's boundless energy, even during chemo, about how he'd laugh while coloring the hospital bedsheets with food dye. My chest tightened. My fists clenched. I could still see those tiny blue-stained fingers giggling at his color monster roses. My eyes flicked to the bouquet on the casket. White roses, just like Liam used to dye with food coloring. Isabel had always said white roses were too plain. But I'd insisted. They're not for you, I'd told her. They're for Liam. And now, she wasn't even here to see them. Not that she deserved to be. Then my phone buzzed again. A text. It was from Isabel. Sorry I couldn't make it. Important business meeting. I'll make it up to you. Make it up to me? Make up for abandoning me at our child's funeral? For sipping margaritas in paradise while I buried the only pure thing we ever created? No, no, this wasn't something you make up for. This was war, and she had no idea what was coming. I don't remember much of what the pastor said after that. The words blended together. Prayers, scriptures, memories of Liam. None of it could reach me through the fog of rage clouding my mind. I sat there, staring ahead like a statue, pretending to listen, pretending to mourn in the way people expect a father to mourn. Stoic, respectful, quiet. But inside, I was a damn storm. The image of Isabel laughing by that pool in Hawaii was scorched behind my eyes. I couldn't blink without seeing it. Couldn't breathe without tasting the betrayal on my tongue. And every time I looked at the empty seat beside me, it felt like someone was jabbing a blade deeper into my chest. That was her place. She should have been right there, holding my hand, crying beside me, saying goodbye to our son. But no, she chose sunshine and cocktails. She chose him. I didn't know who the guy was. Didn't matter. Some smug, bronze boy toy with abs and an ego. He looked like he didn't even know what loss was, like he'd never had to bury something he loved. And there he was, parading around with my wife, while I tried to keep my soul from shattering into pieces. My fists curled into tight balls in my lap. I could feel my nails digging into my palms, grounding me. Pain was better than grief. Rage was better than sorrow. I couldn't afford to break down. Not now. Not here. Not in front of them. Because everyone in that room was watching me. Neighbors, co-workers, distant cousins who hadn't called in years, now gathered like moths around the flame of tragedy. I could feel their eyes crawling over me, their minds busy stitching together stories. Maybe they didn't know where Isabel was, but they were guessing. They were always guessing. And I could imagine the whispers. She didn't even come to the funeral. Something must be wrong in their marriage. Did she leave him? Cheat on him? Poor Nathan, raising that little boy alone in the end. I clenched my jaw, refusing to give them what they wanted. No tears. No public display. No collapse. I would carry this pain in silence, but I would not wear it like a badge for their entertainment. When the service ended, I stood and approached the casket for one final moment. My legs moved on instinct, numb and wooden. I looked down at Liam's peaceful face, softened by the touch of the mortician. Too still. Too quiet. That wasn't how Liam ever existed. He was noise and joy and chaos. He was giggles in the middle of the night and drawings on the walls. He was pancakes for dinner and just one more story, Dad. I reached in and adjusted the blue blanket, tucking it tighter around him. My voice barely escaped. You deserve better than this, buddy. From both of us. I stepped back, swallowing the grief that rose like a tidal wave in my throat. And then my phone buzzed again. I hesitated. Something in me already knew it wasn't sympathy or condolences. I pulled it out, slowly, like I was disarming a bomb. And there it was. Another text. From Isabel. Sorry I couldn't make it. Important business meeting. I'll make it up to you. Make it up to me. She actually had the audacity, the gall, to text me during our son's funeral with a hollow excuse. No remorse. No guilt. Just a casual lie sent between poolside drinks and whatever fantasies she was chasing with that stranger. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My grip on the phone tightened until the case cracked beneath my fingers. I wanted to throw it. Smash it. Hurl it through the stained glass windows behind the altar. But I didn't. Because the rage, it was evolving. It was no longer chaos. It was cold, sharp, focused, like the eye of a storm narrowing in on its target. She thought I'd crumble, that I'd drown in sorrow, that I'd let her slip away into paradise while I cleaned up the ruins she left behind. She didn't know me at all. When I stood to give Liam's eulogy, the entire room turned silent. I walked to the podium, heart pounding, that photo of Isabel still flickering in my mind. But I didn't mention her. Not once. This wasn't about her. This was about Liam. I spoke about his love for life, his impossible strength. I shared the story of how he dyed every white rose in the hospital room with food coloring until the nurses started calling him the little artist. I told them how he once asked me if people become stars when they die, and how he said he'd shine the brightest so I'd never lose him in the sky. I didn't cry. I didn't let my voice crack. Because every word I spoke was a promise, to Liam, to myself, that I would not let his memory be tainted by her betrayal, that I would protect what little I had left of him, that I would make sure she paid for what she had done. After the eulogy, people clapped me on the back, whispered how strong I was. But they had no idea. This wasn't strength. This was war. And Isabel Carter had just declared it. The reception felt like a scene from a play I never auditioned for. People floated around my parents' living room, offering sad smiles and murmured condolences like they were lines rehearsed for a role they didn't want. Plates of untouched cookies, casseroles nobody had the appetite for, and lukewarm coffee sat on every flat surface. The air was thick, not with grief, but with tension. The kind you could feel crawling up your spine, whispering things you weren't meant to hear. They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Isabel's absence spoke louder than any eulogy I could have delivered. And in a small town like ours, silence always said more than words. The whispers buzzed behind my back like flies. I caught pieces, phrases like, "Where is she?" and "He must be devastated." They pitied me. But pity was the last thing I wanted. What I wanted was truth. Honesty. I wanted someone, anyone, to walk up, grab my arm, and say it outright. We saw the photo too. We know what she's doing. We saw what she's become. But no one did. They just kept whispering behind their paper-thin smiles, circling me like vultures waiting for me to fall apart. I didn't. I couldn't. I moved through the house like a ghost, nodding stiffly, shaking hands, thanking people I barely remembered inviting. Every forced conversation felt like a slap. Every "he's in a better place now" was a blade twisting in my ribs. No one dared say her name. No one, except her parents, Elaine and Walter Jennings. They stood near the kitchen, clutching their glasses of lemonade like martyrs. Their expressions were carved from stone, tight-lipped and judgmental, the kind that tried to look like sorrow but bled superiority. Elaine was dressed in her usual pearls and floral print, like this was some garden party instead of a wake. Walter barely looked at me. They hadn't spoken to me all day, and I was just fine with that. But I could feel them watching me, evaluating, dissecting. In their eyes, I'd always been the problem. Never good enough for their precious daughter. Too quiet. Too independent. Too unwilling to be molded. To them, Isabel was flawless. She still was, even now. I was standing by the fireplace, staring at a framed photo of Liam when Elaine finally approached me. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood, and I knew she was behind me before she spoke. "It was a beautiful service," she said sweetly, like sugar hiding poison. "You've been so strong today. It's a shame Isabel couldn't be here, but she's grieving in her own way. You know how hard this has been for her." I didn't turn around. My grip tightened around the picture frame. Liam, holding up his food-dyed rose, his gap-toothed grin radiating joy. I remembered the day he made it. He was so proud. Blue stains on his fingers. Blue streaks on the table. I'd laughed until I cried. Isabel had called it a mess. Too chaotic. Too childish. That was always her problem. Life was too messy for her liking. I turned slowly, the photo still in my hands, and met Elaine's gaze. "I'm sure it has," I said, voice cold and even. Though I imagine Hawaii makes grieving a little easier. For the first time, her expression faltered. Just for a second. Then, like a mask slipping back into place, she smiled tightly. "Grief makes people act out of character," she said. "Isabel just needed space to process everything. You should try to be more understanding." Understanding? My jaw clenched, and I had to force myself not to laugh. She didn't know. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. The image of Isabel, lounging in the sun while our son's casket was lowered into the ground, blazed back into my mind. I wanted to pull out my phone, shove it in Elaine's face, and ask her how that looked for character. I wanted her to see what her daughter really was. But I didn't. I turned away, placing the photo back on the mantel with trembling fingers. My mother appeared at my side like a shield, her presence calm and grounding. "Elaine," she said, her voice edged with warning, "I think you've said enough." Elaine straightened, lips pinched. She didn't argue. just turned and walked away, disappearing into the kitchen with her judgment trailing behind her like perfume. I stood there in silence, feeling the weight of it all collapse onto my shoulders again. "She's just trying to deflect," my mother said quietly. "Don't let her get to you." "She knows," I whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a fact that had settled deep in my chest like a lead weight. My mother nodded slowly. "Of course she knows. She's her mother." And there it was. The final nail. This wasn't just Isabel's betrayal. It was a family affair. Elaine and Walter had known. Maybe not every detail, but enough. And they'd chosen to protect her instead of holding her accountable. They'd stood by while she lied, while she abandoned her son, while she burned everything we built. And they said nothing. The rage I'd kept buried roared to life again. Not chaotic this time. No, this was calculated. Controlled. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd grieve quietly and let it all slip away. They were wrong. So very wrong. After everyone had left, after the last fake hug, the last cold casserole was covered in foil and shoved into the fridge, I escaped to the only place that still felt like mine. Liam's room. The door creaked as I pushed it open. His world was frozen in time, just as he'd left it. Superhero posters on the walls. His toy cars lined up in a crooked row. His tiny shoes by the closet. The scent of bubblegum shampoo still clung to the air like a ghost. My knees almost buckled. I had to steady myself against the doorframe just to breathe. I sat down on his bed, the worn mattress giving just slightly under my weight. There, beside his pillow, was the stuffed penguin he never went anywhere without. It was lopsided and faded, the stitching coming loose around its flipper. He'd carried that thing into every hospital visit. Told the doctors it was his bravery bird. I picked it up, holding it in my lap. The silence crushed me. But then something caught my eye. On the other side of the room, on Isabel's desk. A stack of papers. Carelessly left out. Uncharacteristically disorganized. Isabel was obsessive about order. Everything color-coded, filed, neat to the point of clinical. For her to leave something like that out? It didn't sit right. I stood, crossed the room, and lifted the top sheet. The blood in my veins turned to ice. It was a life insurance policy. Liam's name was printed in bold at the top. Claire Isabel Carter, listed as the sole beneficiary. My name? Nowhere. Heart pounding. I flipped through the pages, faster and faster, each line revealing another knife to the gut. The policy had been taken out 6 months after Liam's diagnosis. 6 months. While I was fighting alongside our son, holding his hand through chemo, sleeping in plastic hospital chairs, Isabel had been planning her exit strategy. And then came the worst part. An amendment, dated 3 weeks before Liam died. She'd removed me as a beneficiary. Her signature was right there, cold, precise, deliberate. It stared up at me like a smirk, as if to say, "You were never part of the plan." I staggered back, the folder clutched in my hand, while rising in my throat. I dropped onto the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. It didn't stop there. Tucked between the papers were receipts. Dozens of them. Bank withdrawals. Credit card statements. A loan against the policy, pulled before Liam's body was even cold. Thousands of dollars. Spent on luxury. Flights. Designer clothes. Hotel stays. A purchase from a boutique hotel in Maui. And suddenly it clicked. The photo. The trip. The lover. Isabel hadn't just cheated. She hadn't just abandoned me during the worst moment of my life. She'd profited from our son's death. She'd turned his suffering into a payout and used it to buy cocktails in paradise. My hand shook as I spread the papers across Liam's floor. The full picture took shape, piece by grotesque piece. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. This was premeditated. This was a mother signing her child's death certificate with one hand and cashing in with the other. I wanted to scream, tear the room apart, set the papers on fire, and watch them burn. But I couldn't. Not here. Not in his room. Not with the bravery bird still in my lap. My phone buzzed on the desk. For a moment, I ignored it. I couldn't handle any more condolences. But then a thought crept in. What if it was her? What if she had the nerve to text again? I picked it up. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Nervous. But determined. I need to talk to you. It's about Isabel. My stomach clenched. I stood up slowly, gripping the phone tighter. Who is this? My name is Mia, she said. I know what she's been doing. I know about Hawaii. I know about the insurance money. My pulse thundered in my ears. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, she admitted. But you should hear me out. Meet me tomorrow, coffee shop on Main Street. 10 a.m. The line went dead. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing like a warning in my ear. Mia. The name didn't mean anything to me. But her voice, it was steady beneath the nerves. There was urgency. There was truth. And something told me I needed to listen. I looked back at the penguin in my hand, then at the mess of documents on the floor. She thought she could take the money and run. Start a new life. Leave me with a grave and a handful of memories. But I wasn't finished. And she had no idea just how far I was willing to go. The next morning, I couldn't shake the weight pressing down on my chest. Sleep hadn't come. I spent most of the night sitting in the dim light of Liam's room, the penguin tucked under my arm, the insurance papers spread across the floor like shattered glass. Every line, every number, every signature screamed one truth louder than the next. Isabel hadn't just left me. She'd sold our pain for a tropical escape. And now, some stranger named Mia wanted to meet. I didn't trust her. How could I? She came out of nowhere, offering breadcrumbs without context. But something in her voice last night, tight, urgent, brittle but steady, had burrowed into me like a splinter. It wasn't the voice of someone looking to stir up gossip. It was the voice of someone who'd also been burned. I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early. It was the kind of place Isabel used to scoff at, plain, a little run down, no fancy lattes or almond milk. Just burnt coffee and overcooked muffins. Good. I wanted her world as far from this one as possible. I scanned the room and spotted her right away. Dark auburn hair pulled into a ponytail, stiff posture, a closed notebook on the table beside her, and a phone turned face down. She didn't look up when I approached. You Mia? I asked. She nodded, stirring her coffee in slow, methodical circles. I sat across from her, the folder of insurance documents tucked under my arm like a weapon. You've got 5 minutes, I said. Start talking. She looked up. Her green eyes were sharp. Angry, yes, but focused. I'm not going to waste your time, she said. Your wife? Isabel, she's been seeing my ex-boyfriend for over a year. I didn't flinch. I already know about Hawaii, I said coldly. The drinks, the hotel, the tanned idiot with his arm around her. She raised an eyebrow, almost amused by my bluntness. Then let me ask you this, she said. Do you know about the money? Or what they're planning to do with it? The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. What money? Mia leaned in slightly. The $1 million payout. The life insurance policy on your son. She promised half of it to Brandon, my ex, so they could start their new life in Maui. Beachfront property. New business. The works. My stomach twisted. I didn't say anything. Instead, I slowly reached into my folder and laid the documents out between us. The policy. The amendment. The receipts. Mia's expression didn't change. So it's true, I muttered. She nodded. Every word. Brandon's an idiot, but not a liar. He bragged about it. I didn't believe him until he showed me proof. Screenshots. Transfers. Even pictures of the house they're planning to buy. She slid her phone across the table. My eyes scanned the screen. Claire. The payout came through. It's more than enough. Brandon. Maui's waiting babe. Claire. Just don't let him suspect anything. Brandon. He's too broken to see straight. Claire. It's already done. My breath left me in a slow, dangerous exhale. The Isabel in those texts wasn't the woman I married. She was cold, calculated, ruthless. Like all those years of love and struggle and parenthood had meant nothing. I slid the phone back. How do I know you're not part of this? I asked. I was, she admitted. For a while, but not by choice. Brandon lied to me too. Said he still loved me. Said Isabel was just temporary. But I saw the truth, and now I've got nothing left to lose. I studied her. Her words were venomous. Yes, but underneath, I recognized the same hollow pain that had hollowed me out. What do you want from me? She leaned back, folding her arms. Revenge. Justice. Call it what you want. But I want them exposed. I want them ruined. And you've got a lot more at stake than I do. I nodded slowly. She wasn't wrong. Isabel hadn't just broken my heart. She'd tried to steal my son's legacy. She'd manipulated our grief, forged documents, and turned the house we built together into just another transaction in her grand escape. And worst of all, she'd thought I wouldn't notice. I'm in, I said, my voice low, hard as steel. Mia gave a small nod. Then, from her bag, She pulled out a thick manila envelope and slid it across the table. Everything you need is in there. Names, dates, accounts, flight details. It's all connected. You just have to pull the right thread. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. Heavy, like truth. As I stood to leave, Mia called out, softer this time. Nathan. I turned. I'm sorry about your son. For what it's worth, I think Isabel's the one who's broken. Not you. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I walked out of the coffee shop, that envelope pressed to my side like a shield, and one thought pulsing in my veins. She thought she could destroy me. She thought wrong. I didn't go home after the meeting with Mia. I drove. Nowhere in particular, just endless miles of cracked roads, rustling trees, and the deafening sound of my own heartbeat. That envelope sat on the passenger seat like a live wire, radiating everything I didn't want to believe but couldn't ignore. Flight details, transaction logs, bank account numbers with both Isabel's and Brandon's names on them. It was all real. It was all happening. And they thought I'd never see it coming. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, the sky had already shifted into a bruised purple. The house stood quiet, lights dimmed, the storm inside me the only thing not at rest. I went straight to my father's study. It was the only place I could think clearly. The room smelled of old paper, dust, and leather, a familiar blend that reminded me of my childhood, back when life still made sense. I dumped everything on the desk. Mia's envelope, the insurance policy, the receipts, the forged amendment. I laid it all out like a detective in a crime thriller, pinning connections with mental string. Only this wasn't fiction. This was my life. And someone had tried to erase me from it. I barely noticed when my mother stepped in. She said nothing at first, just watched me from the doorway, her eyes scanning the spread of chaos. Finally, she asked, "What have you found?" "They're trying to sell the house," I said quietly. She stiffened. "What?" "Claire. Her parents. They forged my signature. Filed the paperwork behind my back." Her face changed. Not shock, confirmation. "I knew it," she muttered, stepping closer. "I knew it." I looked up, stunned. "You knew?" She nodded slowly, anger tightening every word. "Elaine came sniffing around weeks ago, asking questions about the property. Said it was just in case. Tried to get your father to sign something when his memory was acting up. I intercepted it. Hid the papers. Didn't trust her for a second. That hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. They had tried to manipulate my father, who's been struggling with early dementia, into signing over the family home. The same home he built. The same home Liam learned to walk in. The same home they wanted to sell off like an unwanted heirloom to fund a beachfront fantasy. "They're not just after the money," I whispered. "They're after everything." My mother's eyes darkened. "Then don't let them take it." That night, something inside me hardened. I wasn't just a grieving father anymore. I was a man with a mission. The next morning, I made a call to Marcus Hastings, a high school friend turned real estate attorney. We hadn't spoken in years, but he owed me a favor, and I intended to cash it in. When I explained everything, he didn't hesitate. "Jesus, Nathan," he said, "if they really forged your signature, we've got grounds to file a motion and halt the sale immediately. But you'll need to act fast. They could finalize it at any moment." "I have evidence," I said. "And witnesses. Mia, my mother. The paper trail is long and damning." "Good. Then show up. Stop them in person. Force them to see they underestimated the wrong man." And that's exactly what I planned to do. I didn't sleep that night either. I prepared, made copies of every document, backups on a flash drive, screenshots, statements. I wasn't walking into that meeting unarmed. By sunrise, I was dressed in the sharpest suit I owned. Nothing flashy, just clean and purposeful. The kind of suit a man wears when he's ready to draw blood in a courtroom without raising his voice. Before I left, my mother stopped me at the door. She pressed something small into my hand. "Liam's stuffed penguin." "For luck," she said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. Slipped it into my briefcase. Let its familiar weight settle beside the arsenal of truth I was about to unleash. The realtor's office was downtown, tucked between a nail salon and an insurance agency. Claire's car was already there. Of course it was. I stepped through the door, heart pounding, anger caged just beneath my skin. Inside, Isabel sat at the table with her mother, Diana, the queen of condescension. Both women were smiling politely at the realtor, spinning whatever version of the story they'd rehearsed. The moment they saw me, their smiles vanished. "Nathan," Claire said, blinking in surprise. What are you doing here? I dropped the folder on the table with a heavy thud. Papers fanned out like a bomb detonating. Stopping you, I said coldly. The room fell into stunned silence. Claire's eyes darted across the documents. Bank records, forged signatures, insurance payouts, screenshots of her texts with Brandon. This isn't real. I finished. Forged? Misunderstood. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the truth was written in ink and numbers, stacked right in front of her. Diana tried to regain control. Nathan, there's no need to dramatize this. Dramatize? I snapped. You tried to steal my home. You preyed on my father's illness. You helped your daughter cash in on our son's death. They weren't prepared for this. But I was. And I wasn't done. Not even close. Claire went pale the moment I opened the folder. Her confidence cracked like porcelain under pressure. She tried to hide it, smoothing her dress, adjusting her posture, but her eyes gave her away. They darted across the pages like they were searching for an escape route. Diana, ever the snake in pearls, leaned in, her voice still dripping with false charm. Nathan, let's not turn this into a scene, she said. I looked straight at her. No, let's call it what it is, a crime. The realtor, poor man, looked like he'd walked into a war zone. He shifted in his seat, hands hovering nervously over the paperwork. Maybe we should. You might want to stop right there, I interrupted, locking eyes with him. If you move forward with this sale, knowing what's in that folder, you're complicit. He paled even more than Claire. I flipped through the folder deliberately, laying out the evidence like bullets on a table. Forged documents, bank statements, screenshots of Claire's texts with Brandon, even a copy of the fake property transfer agreement with my father's name scrawled at the bottom. Shaky, manipulated, a clear forgery. Claire's voice cracked when she finally spoke. I didn't know Brandon was going to. I didn't mean for it to get this far. That was her defense. A pathetic half-lie, trembling on lips that once promised forever. Diana tried again, her voice sharper this time. You've been unstable since Liam passed. You're not thinking clearly. And there it was, the twist of the knife. Using my son's death as a shield. As a weapon. As justification for their betrayal. I slammed my hand on the table so hard the realtor flinched. Don't you dare use Liam. Don't you dare say his name to excuse what you've done. Claire shrank into her chair. Diana didn't. She squared her shoulders, lifting her chin like royalty on trial. You don't have proof this was intentional. I smiled. You want proof? I pulled out my phone and tapped play. Mia's voice filled the room, followed by Brandon's smug drawl. Their conversation played on speaker for everyone to hear. How Claire had funneled the insurance payout. How she was planning to vanish to Maui with him the moment the house sold. Claire, the payout's in the account. Once the house sells, we're out of here. Brandon, he won't see it coming. Claire, he's too broken to notice. It's already done. Silence. The kind that screams. Claire's face turned ghost white. Diana's mouth opened, but no words came. The realtor stood up, his hands raised like he'd just realized the house was on fire. I think I've heard enough, he said, already walking toward the door. This deal's off the table until legal counsel is involved. I turned back to the women across from me. You thought I was too weak, too blinded by grief, that I'd never dig deep enough to find the truth. Claire's lip quivered. Nathan, please. No, I cut her off. You don't get to beg now. You don't get to want anything from me anymore. Right then, the door swung open. Marcus entered, calm and collected, holding a stack of documents in his hand like they were loaded weapons. Sorry I'm late, he said, nodding to me. Just came from the courthouse. Injunctions filed. The house is officially protected under emergency motion. No sale. No transfer. Everything's frozen until further investigation. He set the papers down on the table like a final verdict. The sound echoed in the room. Diana stood slowly, clenching her jaw. You're bluffing. I met her gaze. Try me. Claire reached for her mother's arm, her voice trembling now. Mom, stop. He's not bluffing. He's got everything. She finally understood. The game was over. The two of them stood, no longer regal, no longer composed. They walked out, their heels clicking against the floor like a retreating army. The door shut behind them with a finality I hadn't felt in weeks. I exhaled. Didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. Marcus clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did good, he said. But this wasn't a victory lap. Not yet. Because the moment they left that room, I knew one thing for certain. They weren't finished. Claire, Diana, and their puppet strings went deeper than I'd even begun to see. And I was just getting started. The legal firestorm had officially begun. We froze their accounts, launched a civil fraud suit, and began tracking every dollar they had tried to hide. Mia turned over more documents, more texts, even flight itineraries Brandon had sent her, bragging about the fresh start with Isabel on Maui's beaches. But this wasn't a fresh start. This was war. For Liam. For me. For the life they tried to steal. They thought I'd roll over. They forgot who I was. The war wasn't over when Claire and Diana walked out of that office. That was just the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of court filings, strategy meetings, and sleepless nights. Marcus and I built the case brick by brick. Every fraudulent signature, every hidden bank transfer, every forged document was added to the mountain of evidence we were ready to bury them with. Mia kept her promise. She turned over everything. Emails, photos, call logs. Brandon, as it turned out, wasn't just careless. He was arrogant, reckless. He bragged to friends, left digital breadcrumbs everywhere. When the pressure mounted, he folded fast. His sworn statement blew the doors wide open. He confirmed that Claire had promised him half the insurance payout. That Diana and Walter helped manipulate my father during his lucid moments. That they'd planned to sell the house, siphon the money, and disappear to Hawaii, leaving me with nothing but memories and a headstone. The judge didn't need much more. Fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, financial exploitation. Claire and her parents were hit with a civil suit, pending criminal charges. Their reputation, once untouchable in our little town, was reduced to ash overnight. The whispers that once followed me at the funeral now followed them. And this time, they weren't whispers. They were headlines. But for me, it wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about protection. Liam's legacy. The judge ruled in my favor on every count. The house was officially mine again. The insurance money, what Claire hadn't already squandered, was frozen and redirected. I requested that it go where it should have gone from the beginning, to the children's oncology unit that cared for my son. And then I did something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I created the Liam Carter Foundation, a nonprofit that would fund pediatric cancer research and provide financial support to struggling families like ours. It wouldn't bring Liam back. Nothing could. But maybe, just maybe, it could keep another parent from going through the hell I had. I used the stolen money to build something honest. Something real. Something his mother never could. Months passed. The noise faded. The headlines moved on. Claire and Diana retreated into silence, no longer the socialites they once were. I didn't see them again after the final hearing. I didn't need to. They were ghosts now. One fall morning, with the leaves crunching beneath my boots, I walked to the cemetery. Liam's grave sat beneath a maple tree, the early sunlight casting golden streaks across the grass. His headstone was simple, just the way he would have liked it. No marble angels. No fancy inscriptions. Just his name, a carved penguin in the corner, and a line that read, "Shine bright, little star." I knelt beside it and pulled the worn stuffed penguin from my coat pocket. The same one that had traveled through courtrooms, lawyers' offices, and late-night breakdowns. I placed it at the base of the stone and brushed a few leaves away. "You'd be proud, buddy," I whispered. "The house is safe. The foundation's up and running. Your name, your memory, it's helping people now." My throat tightened. The wind picked up, rustling the trees gently, like a whisper from the world beyond. I closed my eyes. I promised I'd fix it. And I did. I stayed there in silence for a while, just breathing, just being. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see my father, slowly making his way up the path. His memory had been fading faster lately, but today his eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in months. He looked at the headstone and smiled gently. "He's at peace now," he said. "I hope so," I replied. He reached out, brushing his fingers across the little penguin. "You know," he said, his voice quiet, "Liam told me something once. Not long before he passed." I looked at him, curious. "What did he say?" He said, "Don't worry about Dad. He's stronger than everyone thinks." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't let them fall. "He said that?" I asked. My father nodded. He was right, too. We stood there together. Two men, broken but still standing. The silence between us wasn't heavy this time. It was full, whole. A monarch butterfly floated by, landing gently on Liam's headstone. My father reached out instinctively, but I caught his hand. "Let it be," I said softly. The butterfly lifted off and soared upward, catching the light as it vanished into the sky. And for the first time since that awful day, I felt something inside me shift. Forgiveness? Not yet, but maybe peace. We walked back to the car in silence. As I helped my father into his seat, I asked, "Pancakes?" His eyes lit up. Liam always loved pancakes. "Yes, he did," I said, smiling faintly. As we drove away, I looked once more in the rearview mirror. The little penguin stood guard at the headstone, just as it always had. Not just a toy, a symbol, a promise kept. The war was over. The damage would never fully heal, but I wasn't broken anymore. I was surviving, and somehow that was enough. Looking back, I've come to understand that life doesn't just test us in the moments we expect. It breaks us in silence, behind closed doors, and watches what we do next. I lost my son. I lost my wife. But in the rubble, I found something far more powerful than vengeance: clarity. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: trust is sacred. When it's broken, you don't just lose the person, you lose the part of yourself that believed in them. But that pain, that betrayal, it doesn't have to destroy you. It can build something stronger. To anyone walking through their own storm, especially those of us who've lived long enough to know that time doesn't always heal, I'll say this: you're stronger than you think. Protect what matters. Speak up when something feels wrong. And never let anyone convince you that your grief is weakness. Build your legacy with truth, with love, with resolve. Let those who've gone before us be the reason we stand tall, not the excuse we fall. Because in the end, the most powerful thing we can do isn't just survive. It's transform our pain into purpose. And that's what Liam would have wanted.